All right, I'm sorry, time is up. Please put your pens down. Make sure your name is on your paper.
That was tough.
Hello, Degrassi fans, and welcome to Season 3 of the Degrassi Kid Podcast. What better way to kick things off than by chatting with my dear friend and Degrassi's co-creator, Linda Schuyler. Back in the 70s, Linda was a junior high school teacher with a passion for film. Quickly, she realized there wasn't any media for her young students to see themselves in. So she began creating documentaries with her class about hard-hitting topics like racism, diversity, and inclusion, all from the teenage perspective. From there, Linda Schuyler started a production company with her partner called Playing with Time. Together, they set out to make a single standalone short film called Ida Makes a Movie. At the time, Linda wasn't this big television producer with her own film set and a huge production studio. She was a teacher with a passion for helping young people. When it came time to create Ida's movie, Linda needed to find a place to film. And that's when her dear friend and fellow educator, Bruce Mackey, offered up his home on Degrassi Street. From there, Linda went on to create a series that spanned 40 years on television, produced over 500 episodes, and aired in over 140 countries all around the world. Ida Makes a Movie became what we now know as the first episode of Degrassi. And Linda Schuyler is here today to tell us what it was like to create our favorite TV show. We're going to ask Linda about some of Degrassi's most controversial episodes. We'll talk about what it was like when Linda sold the company. And we'll find out how Linda felt when it came time to accept that Degrassi was really over. Yes, I'm going to ask her about the reboot. Linda's memoir, The Mother of All Degrassi, is out now, and you can find a link to order it in the description, or stick around and hear how you can win your very own copy of The Mother of All Degrassi. But for now, let's chat with Degrassi's co-creator and my friend, Linda Schuyler. Talk about a show that impacted people like me and people like you on a brand new season of the Degrassi Kid Podcast. Oh my gosh, it's finally happening! Linda Schuyler is here on the Degrassi Kid Podcast. Linda, how are you doing?
Oh my gosh, Jocelyn, I'm doing great, and I'm so happy to be here with you. My favorite Degrassi kid.
That's amazing. What a compliment. We're old buds because we recorded a web series together. But Linda, I have to know, making a TV show is such a group effort. How did it feel to sit down and write your life's memoir?
That's a loaded question, Jocelyn. It's been challenging. You know, as a producer, I'm used to being behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. I'm used to having a team of people working with me. And I have to say, the first thing that struck me about trying to write my memoir was I was lonely. Oh. Well, I'm so used to when I work with my writers on the show, you know, I have a room full of writers, we brainstorm ideas and we feed off one another. And it took me a long time to really, you know, work on my own. And then I had to stop myself from writing a couple of paragraphs and saying, oh, that's bullshit. I'd go back and edit it. And so then I would have to tell myself, Linda Schuyler, please don't do that. Just keep writing.
Oh my God, that's so funny. You know, I had the crazy opportunity to read the book in advance. Thank you. And there's so many amazing stories that you've taken the time to sit down and write. And I don't want to spoil any of those. Right. Instead, I want to talk about some behind the scenes moments that didn't make it into the book. Like the very first episode of Degrassi that I ever watched was when Melanie gets her first bra and the boys start picking on her at school. Mm-hmm. Did that by any chance happen to come from the real life of Linda Schuyler?
Oh my gosh, it was so painful. We lived in Canada, and my grandmother in England sent me for my birthday my very first bra. I think I was a slow, mature, I think I was in about grade 7. And I put this bra on, and all of a sudden I had some breasts that I didn't quite, you know, realize I had. And I very proudly wore this to school. And I was so teased, and people asked me if I'd stuffed Kleenexes under my shirt. And that, you know, those kinds of experiences, as you probably know from your own growing up years, they stay with you. And it was really great. I was recounting the story one day to my writer, Jan Moore, and he said, okay, that's going in the show.
That's incredible. That's the thing. There's so many of us wonder what stories come from the kids, but in reading your book, I had no idea how many of them came from your own personal life. And, when I was in junior high school, I went through a tough time because I was in the closet, and a resource that I used was the Kids Help Phone. So I want to know, why was it so important to you that with the Mother of All Degrassi, you took your author proceeds and donated all of them to the Kids Help Phone?
Well, first of all, I was there when the Kids Help Phone launched, which was in the late 80s. And it was great. There were a bunch of the Degrassi kids came with me to the launch party. It was so wonderful to see that Canadians were getting a service that is now 24/7. It's across the country, sea to sea to sea. It's in both official languages, and they're now adding native languages as well. What Kids Help Phone does is like the natural extension from Degrassi. In Degrassi, we built awareness, and I'm, was hoping that our stories would touch young people and make them feel they're not alone, but we can't personally solve their issues for them. And so Kids Help Phone is a way, if they were experiencing some of the issues that we brought up in our show, there was a phone number they could call, and they could call and speak to some counselor. And then since then, they've expanded it. So a lot of their work is done digitally. I'm so enamored with this not-for-profit organization. When the Degrassi show was finished, we weren't able to tag it anymore. And I thought, oh, I know what I want to do. I want to donate my author proceeds to Kids Help Phone. And they're thrilled and I'm thrilled. So it's a great partnership.
Oh, I love that so much. I was not surprised at all when I heard you were donating to the Kids Help Phone. I thought that was very on brand for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the reason I relate so much to Degrassi is because it's the show that helped me come out of the closet. So, I would love to talk about the first time you ever told a queer story on Degrassi. Mm-hmm. There's an episode of Degrassi Junior High called Rumor Has It, where a rumor goes around that Miss Avery might be a lesbian. I would love to know, why was that story one that had to be told on Degrassi?
Well, that was the first, as you know, of a long, long line of queer storytelling on Degrassi. But that one is way back in the early mid-'80s, I guess. And at that time, I had a very close friend, Bruce Mackey. Actually, if people have watched the podcast or are walking tour, they'll see who Bruce Mackey is. I dedicated my book to Bruce because Bruce at that time was a gay school teacher, but he couldn't come out because you just weren't allowed to be a school teacher and have your sexuality known. So he lived a closeted life, and it was a duplicitous life whereby, during the week, he was a school teacher and upstanding. And then on the weekends, he was in the bathhouses and partying. And it made me so sad to see that this beautiful friend of mine couldn't live his true life. So it was me watching him and thinking, oh my God, he needs the freedom to be who he is. That became the inspiration to many, many of our storylines. But back in that first one, because of the times we were doing it, we didn't even have one of our students, question their sexuality. We did it with the teacher, which is something now we would never do. We would look at it 100% from the young person's perspective. But those were different times back there in the 1980s. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think that's one thing that's so interesting about watching Degrassi is I always call it a time capsule of the teenage experience, because that story may seem outdated now, but at the time, queer people couldn't even exist, let alone be on TV. So I think it was truly revolutionary at the time.
Thank you.
And one thing about that episode is because of all the success on the Kids of Degrassi Street, when it came time to put Degrassi Junior High on the air, networks were buying it up like crazy. Except the BBC when it came to this one episode about Miss Avery. So I'm so curious, was this kind of your first battle with censorship on Degrassi?
Was that the first time? I'm trying to think when that would have come out, because the Brits also had trouble with Spike's storyline.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and one of the headlines read, no sex before 6, please. And what that meant was that the BBC were running our show at a 5 o'clock time slot, and it wasn't appropriate to have anything matters dealing with sex or sexuality at 5 o'clock, because we would be messing with young minds too much. After 6, it would have been fine. That was their time slot. So I was very surprised at that because I thought the Brits would have been more liberal. My show's always been caught like this. Like sometimes it's considered a kid's show, sometimes it's considered an adult show. And in a way, I think that's part of its success because that push-pull of are you a child, are you an adult, is a lot of the tension that sits behind so many of our stories. So, but it's always been, yeah. So I was surprised at the Brits on that one, to tell you the truth.
And if you want a nice surprise, then enter the Degrassi Kid Contest to win your very own copy of the Mother of All Degrassi. All you have to do is let us know, what does Degrassi mean to you? Share your story on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok and tag both myself and the Mother of All Degrassi in your post. Then I'll select a winner and send you your very own copy of Linda's memoir. You can find more details in the podcast description, but for now, let's go back to chatting with Linda Schuyler, our Mother of All Degrassi. Speaking of Spike's pregnancy storyline, one thing about acting on Degrassi is you really become an ambassador for the stories that your character takes on. I mean, Amanda, the actress who plays Spike, she was getting fan mail with gifts for little baby Emma. So I want to know, as the producer of the show who cares so much about your teenagers behind the scenes, what did you do to prepare them for these big storylines?
I think the best answer to that question is rooted in the fact that I spent 8 years as a classroom teacher. And I had this exercise where I would imagine my class, each one of them with an invisible backpack on their shoulders. And that backpack held their story. And it was unlike any other one in the classroom. It was their unique story. And so I've always kept that in mind when I work with actors in front of the camera, when I work with my team behind, the other side of the camera, that everybody comes with their own story. And so we have to respect that. And particularly, you ask about the actors in the show. If there was a storyline coming up that was going to, I knew that was going to be challenging for the young people, I would always have them in my office before we did the read through, because when we do the read through on the script, all the cast assemble for a round table discussion and read, but they don't see the script beforehand. So they don't know what's going to happen. However, for the young people who would have a role that I knew was going to challenge them, I would always speak to them before my office and talk to them about it, and ask them if they're going to be comfortable taking this role on. They didn't have to answer me that until after they read the script. And then we would have a dialogue, and in some cases we would in counselors and specialists on a particular subject to help them through. But again, each one was a case by case, just like those little invisible backpacks. Whoever, we tailored whatever the support needed to be to the character and to the actor.
That's incredible. I knew you had workshops, and I knew that you checked in with the kids to make sure they were okay with their stories, but I had no idea about all that extra detail. That's truly amazing. And I'm going to pause here for a moment with a shameless plug. I went to the University of Toronto Archives this week and actually found the workshops that Linda and her team put together for the Degrassi Classic cast. They had actors like Neil Hope complete these worksheets that would ask questions like, describe your parents, describe where you live, what are your hobbies? But they would complete these programs through the lens of their character. So for this month's bonus episode, I'll be sharing some of my findings over on patreon.com/DegrassiKid. You'll be able to hear my full detailed analysis, thoughts, and opinions on it. How does that sound? And on Patreon, you'll also find a bonus clip of me and Linda Schuyler where I ask her, how did your role change from the kids of Degrassi Street to Degrassi the Next Generation? But for now, let's get back to talking to Linda Schuyler. Linda, I actually want to talk about Neil Hope specifically. One thing I always admired about Neil as a fan is that he wanted to help kids by talking about his struggles through his character wheels.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how, as a producer, you were able to support kids like Neil, who had these struggles going on at home? Specifically, I believe your company created something called the Playing with Time Foundation. Can you tell me about that?
The foundation was an amount of money we set aside each time from our filming budget that was virtually kind of invisible money. It went into the foundation, and the mandate of our foundation was to support our actors and we could support them in a number of ways. Some of them applied to the foundation and got cash to go towards their university tuition. Some of them we provide counseling for if they needed counseling, and Neil took advantage of some of that.
Mhm.
And we also made money available that they could apply for to produce their own projects. And Neil approached us, and he wanted to do a documentary on what it was like to be the child of alcoholics.
Wow.
And that was Neil's lived experience, and that was the experience and the story he wanted to share with others. And I thought it was very bold of him to do that, and we were 100% supportive of his efforts.
That's incredible. You know, I remember being quite taken aback by Neil's story in Degrassi Talks. This was a program where the real life Degrassi actors traveled around Canada and spoke to real teenagers about issues that, you discussed on Degrassi. I actually was so taken aback by it that I want to play the opening monologue where Neil Hope introduces himself. And the topic that he's talking about is alcohol.
Both Wheels and I have had our lives changed by alcohol. Wheels lost his parents due to a drunk driving accident. I lost my real father to an alcoholic's disease. You'd think my decision to stay away from alcohol would be an easy one. It's not. Pressures to drink are everywhere.
I want to know, Linda, in your book, you talk about a documentary you made with your class and how it aired on TV out of context. And, you said that you felt really hurt because your students trusted you with their stories, and then you had no control over how they played out on TV. I want to know, did this have any impact on the way you made the Degrassi Talks series? Because it's about real teenagers, was there any special set of rules when it came to the show?
I don't think that there were a special set of rules. I mean, the trademark of Degrassi is that it's always respectful to our young protagonists, or in this case, the young people that we were interviewing. And there's something I like to talk about. When we got the Peabody Award, that was for having our first transgender storyline. Before Orange is the New Black, I might add. They gave us a citation that said, this story was very special because it dealt with the issue without sensationalizing or without trivializing. And when I heard that, I was so grateful for that acknowledgement, because that is exactly what I've always strived for, is to be respectful of young people's stories. We're not trying to be sensational with them, but we're also not trying to pretend it's not important. You'll get over it, sort of thing. So finding that middle lane between sensationalism and trivializing is really important. And it's equally important in a dramatic and scripted show as it is in a documentary show. It's the same important value. It's a core value that is just Degrassi through and through.
And you guys knocked it out of the park. I mean, it is so impressive how this show, made by adults, can really authentically capture what it feels like to be in high school.
Now, remember, a lot of my adults were much younger than me. As the show went on, I made it a real choice to hire younger writers, so that we had experienced writers and we had younger writers. And before each season began, my writing team would go into various high schools throughout Toronto, and they would just shadow for a day or two and just observe. So, we were constantly trying to find ways to keep ourselves authentic. And of course, our young cast, which were cast age appropriate, they did a good job of reminding us of that too.
I remember there's a behind the scenes special called Degrassi Between Takes. And one of the Degrassi junior high kids, she goes, Kit and Linda are so old. They need us. They don't remember what it's like to be in high school. I mean, they're 30. And now I'm almost 30 and I'm like, hey. So, Linda, a lot of us Degrassi fans know the standout moments, right? Spike's pregnancy storyline, Manny's abortion, Fiona coming out of the closet. Are there any stories you never got to tell on Degrassi, or are there ones that you felt you didn't get to push far enough?
I don't know if I can answer that per se. What I can tell you is, though, we would start each season, and we would have a blue sky session with all the writers, and we would just throw on the whiteboard snippets of storylines we wanted, topics we wanted to do. And there was one, and I alluded to this earlier, topic that was on the board for a long time. And each season we weren't sure how to do it, because again, we didn't want to just shoehorn stuff in to be sensational. And the topic that sat on our board for a number of years was the transgender storyline. And we just couldn't find a way in that felt respectful or correct. And so finally, when we did, we felt we cracked the storyline. That was on, as I say, it sat on the boards for a long time. There needs to be a place in society, a time in society when it will, maybe not everybody will accept it, but at least there's an opening for us to tell it. Then we also needed to find the correct actor. And that was a challenge as well. So when we met Jordy, we realized that we had a good, the right elements were colliding, and we were able to give ourselves the permission to go forward with confidence to tell that story. And each year there will be different things on our boards. And so much of it is also impacted by what is going on in society at that moment. I can't believe, if we were doing a whiteboard today, this whole transphobia that is sweeping through, and it was so scary. We just had elections for school boards here, and there were people standing on that platform. Fortunately, I don't think maybe one of them got voted in, but it's really, that is certainly something that, if and when Degrassi comes back, I would hope that would be on the whiteboards.
Absolutely. Yeah, that leads into the obligatory question. Do you have any information about the reboot? Anything you can say?
Jocelyn, I'm retired. And as you know, I sold the company to Wild Brain. And there were some exciting noises coming out of Wild Brain, but I'm not an insider. And as I said in my book, I now will be promoted to the grandmother of all Degrassi when the new show comes out. And I'm looking forward to sitting back on my couch, having a nice glass of wine, petting my cat, hugging my husband, turning on the TV, and welcoming the grandkids into my living room.
I love that.
I hope that's sooner rather than later.
I love that. Every comment would be, what about the reboot? What about the reboot? So now we have the answer. So that's perfect. Whenever you sold the company, did your role change in any type of way?
After we sold the company, we continued producing. We produced, I think, one more season. I think we produced the final season of Next Generation once the company had sold. And then we did the 2 years, which ended up being 4 seasons of Degrassi Next Class for Netflix. No, my role was the same. I didn't have to worry about pesky things like payroll and cash flow.
Fair enough.
Which when you are the CEO of your own business, it's not just the stories you're telling, but it's also the responsibilities of being an entrepreneur and making sure your company stays afloat and people are well looked after. So that was a bit liberating after we had sold the company, because I really had the freedom to just really focus on creative, which was quite lovely.
Oh my God, that's incredible. I always wondered that. And I want to know if there's anything you can share. I know Steven's memoir ends with him working on season 5 of Next Class, and then it never happens. There's a few questions I have about this. First, what are the stories? What season 5 supposed to look like for Degrassi?
We had a very rich cast of characters, as we always do. And it's that whole fact that we work with an ensemble cast that gives us so much opportunity for story, which allows us to go in really big, serious ways or go into smaller, fun issues. So, we're hoping to continue developing, just keep going. There was lots on the whiteboard. There was no shortage of story, but at that point, there was no broadcaster interest. And so unfortunately, we never got to see what season 5 would have looked like.
Oh my gosh. I feel like season 3 and 4 is where Degrassi really found itself on Netflix too. And I know we were all excited for it. But the end of Degrassi, it's so sad as a fan because it just ended. When was the moment that you realized this is it?
I don't think I've had that moment.
Oh my God. Okay. I love that answer. I was expecting us to both get really sad right now. And that answer leaves me full of so much hope. Okay. So obviously the next question is, Linda, what does the future of Degrassi look like to you?
I think the world is ready for a Degrassi reboot. What I'm seeing is, as you know, in my book, I talk about when we finish schools out, I truly believe that was the end of Degrassi.
Mm-hmm.
And I said I was done. My partner Kit was done. He and I split up. My head writer Yan, he was done. He moved to Arizona for a while. So no more. However, the show didn't go away. And what happened was it was on it ran on a strip after school, and a whole new generation of kids found the show. And so fan mail was coming in, and there was fan engagement going on. Then I think Jonovision did a show where they invited all the Degrassi kids back, and there was a reunion, so that we really found that there was this grassroots, ground level Degrassi stuff happening. And that's when Yan and I said, you know what? Maybe it's time to develop the next generation. And then when we realized that Emma, Spike's baby from the classic show, would be at the age to go into junior high, we said, oh my gosh, and by this time we had spent 10 years away from Degrassi, and we had a whole new renewed energy and interest. And, we realized there was way more story to tell. So the time seemed right to come back with a reboot. Well, what I'm feeling right now, Jocelyn, is something that you're a part of. There is a new fan base out there. And I was talking to the people from WildBrain the other day, and they said that right now, Degrassi is available on so many platforms that there is a bigger audience right now watching Degrassi than there ever has. So I feel like once again, there is something happening in the zeitgeist, and the times are getting very close to welcoming the next generation.
Yes, absolutely. Because I'm so happy to hear that for you, it didn't feel like it was ever over, because of online, I felt that exact same way. I don't think I could be this big of a Degrassi fan if there wasn't anybody to talk to about it. Like, what would I do?
Right.
Just post about it by myself? And so I'm so happy to hear that you recognize that it is still alive and well, because we're talking about it all day.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep it alive. And the thing that I love about Degrassi, I said this on my radio spot, is that it can exist forever because of those core values you implemented in 1979. It can exist in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. It can exist 50 years from now, because you never sensationalize anything. Teen issues don't change. The world in which they happen is constantly evolving. So I am so excited to see whatever happens forward on Degrassi, and it's going to stay alive. It's going to stay alive forever. And I'm going to make sure of it.
Good for you, Miss Degrassi Kid.
You don't have to worry. Now, the viewers can't see what I'm holding up, but it is a postcard from the 1980s of the episode Cookie Goes to Hospital. This was given out in our mail out tier this month, and it would be something you guys gave out on like Degrassi Street and around your production office to advertise the show.
I know, like handing out little cards on the street, letting people know our show is coming on air.
Did you ever expect that it would lead to all of this, Linda?
Talk about your humble beginnings, right? Like, no, of course, no idea. I told you that when we were doing our walking tour, when we walked down Degrassi Street together, I had no idea that the house that my best friend Bruce let us shoot in would, which was on Degrassi Street, would then turn into the name of a series, which would then turn into a franchise that would be sold around the world. I could, as a public school teacher, I never could have dreamed that might have happened.
Oh my God. Well, I am so glad that it did. And I am so happy for you. And I'm so proud of you. Like, it's all built up into you writing a memoir. And I'm so excited for fans to start reading it. Can you tell us, what do you hope everyone gets out of the book?
I think there's sort of a two-stream approach for the book. One is, I'm hopeful, like you have pointed out, that people are just going to be genuinely interested in the evolution as to what were the roots of some of these stories and themes, which played constantly into Degrassi, and how much of those themes came from my own heart because of my lived experience. And the other thing, and I've had quite a few comments from people who have read early copies, who are sort of women of my age, who say, oh my gosh, Linda, I remember those times. I remember what it was like. So it's sort of, I'm hoping there's something in my book that will be like the show, like to touch people and say, I've been there too. I also, I'm not shy. I talk about, as a woman, having dealt with my own infertility battles. And so I tried to put myself through the same rigor that I would a TV show. And, just sort of, here it is, guys. This is my story. This is how Degrassi evolved out of my story. And I'm hoping there will just be bits and pieces in there that will say to somebody, oh yeah, I feel that way too. Or, and then maybe other people will just read it and enjoy it, and who knows?
Oh my God. We also can't forget that you and I did a web series together. Linda took me to 10 iconic Degrassi locations. She took me to the real Degrassi Street. She took me to Degrassi High. We went to the set of The Next Generation and saw what it looked like today. Linda, can you tell everyone, why should they watch our web series?
Oh my gosh. We're rock stars, as Jocelyn.
We are. We did great.
I loved it. Here's me, in my mid-70s, and you in your 30s, and the two of us taking a stroll over these iconic Degrassi sites and just sharing reminiscences. It was, I think, I was just so pleased about how well you and I just clicked, and it's a whole lot of fun. And in 10 times 90-second spots, we got a lot of Degrassi history out there. And the way the people, I know you're hearing some wonderful comments back from the fans, and I know we've had some great numbers of people viewing our little videos, eh?
Yeah, they just skyrocket. People are actively waiting for it, and that makes me so happy. And I love that you can see me, you can see us visibly become closer, because the first one I'm standing there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm on Degrassi Street with Linda Schuyler. This is crazy. And then by Degrassi High, we're just like strolling along, talking about the show. And I am so happy that I have a time capsule of that moment to see me. I get to watch me become friends with Linda Schuyler on screen. It was so fun. so fun.
It was a special moment.
My favorite moment, I think, was at Degrassi High. At the end of every segment that we did, we would turn around and our amazing crew would be like, you guys did great. Good job. Like, let's move on now. And we just keep going. But at the end of Degrassi High, we turned around and it was dead silent. And after a pause, someone finally said cut. And they all started just clapping and being like, oh my God, that was the best one ever. I don't know how we're going to cut it down in 90 seconds. That was probably my favorite standout moment from the shoot. That's when I felt the most confident. And I was like, here I am with Linda Schuyler doing this. So I would actually like to share with Degrassi fans a bit of our conversation from that segment that never actually made it into the Degrassi High episode. How does that sound?
Sounds great, Jocelyn.
Oh my gosh, I can just remember us being here with extras all over and waiting, dolly tracks laid. And I can't tell you the number of times we shot here, extras on the floor, extras over here, our big Degrassi sign up ahead, right? So many memories here. Let's go, let's go sit over
talk about them.
Here's a lovely piece of history. When I was auditioning for Ida Makes a Movie, I didn't own my office or anything, and I had no place to do the auditions. This building used to be a teacher's college, and I knew it from my teaching days, so I did the auditions for Ida Makes a Movie here. No idea that a few years later, it would be the home of Degrassi High.
Oh my God. Yeah, and you guys did amazing with that, especially the season 2 opener, Bad Blood. Wow.
HIV AIDS, I think that was about like 1989.
Wow, what was it like to tell that story in the 80s?
It was, we had tremendous help from an organization called People with AIDS, and they were trying to get into the schools and do education that this was not just a gay disease. This was something that could be happening in the straight world, which is how we chose to tell our story. And we put Joey and his arch nemesis, the bully Dwayne, in a very critical situation. Again, not backing away from the fact that it can, hit the straight community as much as the gay community. But there were people who were very nervous. Some of our parents did not want their kids to come to set because they knew that we had PWA people there.
All of those things will be linked in the description. But Linda, those are all the questions I have for you. Do you have anything else you want to add or anything you want to share?
No, Jocelyn, just thank you for your energy and your enthusiasm. It just makes my heart feel wonderful. And I'm so glad you're engaging with so many of our other fans who are out there. And Keep up the good work, my love.
Oh, yay! Thank you so much, Linda. I mean, you know my speech of how much this means to me. I can't thank you for enough for all of this.
My pleasure.
So you guys can find the Mother of All Degrassi wherever you find your books, and you can find more details on how to enter our Mother of All Degrassi giveaway linked in the description. But for now, I bid you adieu as we say thank you to our Patreon subscribers. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I want to say a huge thank you to our newest subscribers, Victoria, Mitch, Tylea Santiago, Ashley Sadao, and Julia Dawson, who all signed up over our season's break. I hope they'll be joining me at Degrassi Trivia Night to kick off season 3 of the Degrassi Kid podcast. And of course, those subscribed to our mail-out tier, Brittney, Sarahjei, Max, and Stevi Gerrior, our Degrassi Kids, Alyssa, Brittany, Georgia, and Randy Carter, and our ultimate Degrassi fans, Amber, Annabelle, Annie C, and Annie M, Chrissy, Dave, Evie, Glenn, Holly J. Wonders, Kat Marie, who goes by Westbush Slim, Mitch, Najama, Owen, Rachel, Rebecca J, and Rebecca from the Trail Mix podcast, the Hey Degrassi Make This Reboot Count Facebook group, Riley, Sam Chev, Sam B, SB, Shelby, Susan, Steve Teal, and Victoria. You guys have all made my dreams come true, and now Linda freaking Schuyler was on my podcast. Thanks, guys!